That's kind of what you do at John. You just keep
He's
going.
IT right now.
He enjoys repairs on cars, he farms sorghum, and of course he's deeply involved in letterpress printing and has an amazing collection of antique printing presses. He's been a great friend to history here and to our society, and we're really happy he's here today. And we're going to relax for a minute and let him get all connected up, and he's going to talk about a subject he loves and he's researched for many. I did have a guy come to, you can tell I'm tap dancing up here. I did have a gentleman come to the archive several years ago and wanted to see pictures of the Mayberry Springs Inn. And this was before we had things on the computer, and I actually brought out physical pictures. This was about 2008 or 9. And by now we have digitized over, 80,000 images, which isn't 80,000 separate photos because you do the back too, but I'm just bragging on us there. But then I brought out physical pictures, and he just peered at them and looked at them and peered at them, and he did not look like a happy camper. And I came over and I said, "Are you kind of what you wanted to see?" And he said, no. And he pointed at the picture of the Mayberry Inn and he said, "Where's the ghost?" I swear to God. And he came in determined, he was convinced that he was going to see a picture of a I'm always so prepared. That was totally oh. Yeah. There was one time we had a problem. Or is that just oh, I didn't talk about it. I need everybody's attention again. They're going to fire me. I forgot something so important. Hidden Hot Springs is this Sunday from 2 to 4. 2 wonderful homes in the Whittington area. We have lots of brochures back there if you'd like to take one. And we still have tickets available. This is a very important annual fundraiser for us. These 2 homes were designed by I. Granger McDaniel, a very famous local architect, famous for his mid-century architecture. He's a gentleman who, he was in Hot Springs High School. World War II started in Europe. U.S. hadn't ended the war yet, but he wants to get over there and fight for democracy. And he took a few flying lessons at our airport. He left the high school. He forged a birth certificate. He forged a transcript and got himself up to Canada. Ran away with Canada with these things he forged himself and got accepted into the Canadian Air Force. And from there, he was transferred to England and he was a pilot in an American wing of the RAF. They called them the Eagle Squadron. He was shot down on his first mission as a solo captain, the main captain in charge, and he spent most of the rest of the war in a Stalag, a German prisoner of war camp. And he later became the figure that inspired the Steve McQueen character in the movie The Great Escape, except without the motorcycle. They made up the motorcycle. And he was a wonderful architect and a fascinating man. And these two places were designed by him. One is a home that Matt Bush, a contractor here, had him design at 111 Daily Terrace Drive. And the other is the offices he designed for his business at 800 Whittington Avenue. And it's been turned into a private home, but still has all these really neat features in it. These are really cool homes. And you can purchase tickets and come to the tour. And you would also help the Historical Society. You could give them to a friend who would like to go if you can't go. Okay? Okay. And my other speech is, don't forget you to renew your membership or join. If you do that today, your name can still go in this year's record as a member of the society. But we've kind of reached that line where we have to say, whoops, if you join after this or renew after this, your name will go in next year's book instead of this year's. So thank you for being so patient during the commercial, but it's important. Thank you. And you can get your tickets this week online. You can also renew your membership online at Garland County Historical Society website. Okay, it's all right.
Good afternoon.
Yay!
Is the microphone? No. It's not very loud. Can you hear me okay? Yes?
No.
Yes.
Yes, very good.
Is the
Thank
microphone
goodness
on?
for computers.
No, it's
We can
on.
do with our lives without them.
You want me to turn it up?
I do need 2 volunteers to help hand out items. Howard, you look like an able-bodied volunteer. Joanne?
She's not able
Hang
bodied.
on just a minute, and I'll tell you when.
Oh, okay, all right.
Howard is handing out, don't disappear on me.
I'm gonna sit here.
You here. Howard is handing out a flyer. Liz doesn't know I'm doing any of this.
Am I the only person doing it?
Yeah, right now you are.
That's right.
Yes. As you hand them out, other people will multiply your efforts.
Which side is that?
We have a phenomenal historical society here, and I don't say that lightly. I've talked with several and visited and studied at several others around the country. There are a lot of unique things that happen here and continue to happen here. People continue to come here and build their fortunes and add to the cultural fabric. I highly encourage you to join the Garland County Historical Society. This is an unsolicited endorsement. They need volunteers, they need artifacts, they need funding to help keep it going. This is an exceptionally good society. Its collection is professionally managed. We need to keep a good thing going. That's what the blue sheet is for. Now for the big guns, Joanne. Joanne is passing out a green sheet. There's a great investment that I think we can make in our lives, and it's an investment that doesn't cost us much. We have stocks, we don't have to buy a membership, though I do encourage a membership in the society. But the investment is the investment we were handed that we have to pass forward. We had adults invest in us as children. They gave us an education, they made sure we had a place to live, they clothed us, they taught us how to live and become good, productive adults. And now we are all at a point in time, we need to think about what will we give from the past to pass forward to the future. I highly encourage you to consider this historical society in your estate plans. The second sheet is a checkoff for you. Please check off what you might have that you might wish to share as an investment for the future through the Garland County Historical Society, and give it to this sweet young lady over here to my left, Liz Robbins, before you leave, or send it in the mail in the address below, or communicate via the online email option that's on the website. Together we can help grow the society so that those who gave to us in the past, we can make sure that the future benefits from what we have received. I hope you will agree with me that that's a worthwhile goal. And with that, I'll end the commercial announcement and jump into today's topic. Any success? Wonderful. Leave that up for a while, please. You're an amazing man.
Well, thank you.
Don't disappear.
I
I have
tried.
other things for you after today. My name is John Archibald, and I'm the publisher of Muscadine Press, which puts out a couple of publications, including Ouachita Life, which is available here in the lobby. And I have had a special interest in Mayberry Springs for more than 30 years. I want to thank Liz Robbins and your excellent volunteers for allowing me to talk about one of my favorite topics, Mayberry Springs. And I would also ask if there are any Mayberry, Rector, Hain, or Bradford family members in the audience. I'd love to talk with you afterwards. I have a story to share with you. It's about a place called Mayberry Springs. Have you heard of it?
Yes.
Starting largely and getting focused, in North America, we have an old mountain range. It's the oldest in North America. You might have heard of it also. It's the Ouachita Mountains. And in the Ouachita Mountains, there's a group of mountains called the Zigzag Mountains. And within the Zigzag Mountains, exactly 14 miles due west of Hot Springs, are a collection of 4 smaller mountains. And these 4 smaller mountains, according to a hydrology report, have the largest spring in Garland County that is forcing water constantly to the surface. Yes, even bigger than Arbordale, according to the hydrology report. At its surface, there are known to be approximately 150 springs that also pour out water, but as they reach the surface, they pass different mineral contents and therefore produce different results. There are 4 notable springs of Mayberry Springs that I'll talk about. The local area of the 4 hills with the springs in the center is full of wild anise and also very rare jonquils, according to a jonquil collector I talked with a few years ago. So geologically, we have this anomaly called Mayberry Springs. We know it's been there, we think, for about 11,500 years. If anyone was here that long ago, please see me afterwards. I'd like to talk with you. But now that we know where is Mayberry Springs, let's also talk about what is Mayberry Springs. It's named after a pioneer businessman, an entrepreneur, a very, I don't know how to describe him, quite honestly. He was also an engineer. We think he was professionally educated, a man by the name of David Mayberry. David came and built the first inn. The first inn was a rectangular building, quite strong. And then with the boom that happened at Silver City, west of Crystal Springs, between Crystal Springs and Mount Ida, he and his wife added on to the building the east wing, or gallery as we sometimes call it. And after that, the third rendition of this place called Mayberry Springs was occupied by the Rector family. Governor Henry Rector's son, Elias Rector, and his wife, Rosebud, bought the property and turned it into their summer home. And they also made changes to it. It continued as the home for Indian Rector, who was the first athlete from Arkansas to not only place in the Olympics, but also he was a silver medalist. And then the 4th building is unfortunately the one that fell into ruins for a number of years and has disappeared. We might almost say that there is a 5th building of Mayberry Springs, and that is the natural state to which it has returned. So let's talk a bit about David Mayberry. Who is this fascinating gentleman? We know he was born between about 1800 and 1803 in Tennessee. We know he arrived in Montgomery County in the 1930s. We know that he had at least 3 wives, maybe 6 wives, and we also know he had at least 14 children. He also bought several hundred acres of land. We're aware that he bought and owned the Mayberry Springs parcel by 1846. He built a cabin across from the springs, we think in the early 1850s. His father then died about 1853, leaving David a very large inheritance. And it's about that time we see the construction of the inn known as Mayberry Springs, the first version of the inn. And it was a very plain affair. I was going to draw you a line diagram, but in the interest of time, I'll just verbally describe it. If you can, picture a rectangle, and the short side of the rectangle is facing you at Highway 270, Albert Pike Road, and it goes back and it's built into a slope. And so you have 4 rooms in front, and you have 3 rooms in back on a porch, and it uses the currents in the change of the day to literally air condition the building as the day goes on. It's a simple affair, but it's a very strong affair. I had a contractor review the building about 15 years ago when it was still standing, and he said that the core of that original building, if stood by itself today and cared for, would easily last another 200 years. So that's how well David Mayberry built this core building that was the original inn. We know that passing Indians used to sleep under the inn. You could almost stand up. Is anyone here 5 foot tall or shorter? Okay, well, if we had a 5 foot tall person or shorter, that would be someone who could stand upright underneath the old inn. And he eventually built cabins to the west of it. And then a little disturbance happened. We call it the war between the states, the Civil War, or other titles. David Mayberry at the start of the war was almost 60 years old. He was too old to fight and enlist for the Confederacy, so he fought in what was called the Home Guard. The Home Guard was a roving branch, if you will, of the Confederate Army. They went through the Ouachita Mountains and tried to chase off Yankees, keep the peace, help where they could. But David Mayberry had a very interesting problem in the Home Guard. He was literally a magnet for getting shot. We know that David Mayberry was shot 16 times. We also know that surgeons over the years tried to remove the mini balls, but they could not remove all of them. And we do think that this effect of lead in his body led to lead poisoning, which in fact, although it hurt him, it created some of the more interesting stories that happened with David later in his life. He has a black servant, Luther, who stays at the the inn, excuse me, it's an inn. The rest of the family evacuates for Mount Ida. His wife and children don't want any part of it. And we have a very lawless time here. We also have another problem going on in Arkansas at this point that's called the Bushwhackers. Bushwhackers are not Confederate, they are not Union, and they are not Home Guard. They're terrorists. They live for themselves, they pillage, they rape, they burn, they steal, and they move from town to town. And that was a common problem throughout the entire length of the war between the states and sometime after. We have Civil War era redoubts, which are trenches that were dug on one of the hillsides next to the inn. They're still there. They're very eroded now. I was able to find them last year when I went looking for them. But this was how seriously the Mayberry family took the protection of this inn, was trying to come up with their own defense with the resources that they had. Luther eventually was beat up by bushwhackers. They forced him to show where David had buried some of his wealth, and they left him very bloody is the account. And after that, he went and joined Mrs. Mayberry and the family in Mount Ida. He would have none of it, of staying out there by himself after that. When the war is over, we find out that the Mayberry family has been reduced by 2 sons. His son James was shot and killed serving for the Confederacy. His son John was shot and killed by carpetbaggers, which were Northerners that came down to the southern states to exploit the discord in the post-war era. And so this was a great grieving moment for the family. And David also had another problem. You remember all the wealth that he inherited from his father. He spent it by buying farmland. It's been noted that the area of farmland that he bought would fit within a rectangle 10 miles on one side by 20 miles on the other, and all of it in Montgomery County. And keep in mind, this is Montgomery County long before Lake Ouachita ever came into focus. So we're talking about rural subsistence farming, Montgomery County. He was a major landowner. One of the difficulties of the post-war era was that county governments had to have funding through taxes. And as was so often the case, and as noted in several sources in our state, what happened was farmers would literally give up their farm to pay their taxes. So they settled their debt, but they had nowhere to live. And there were clashes over farmers who didn't want to leave. David Mayberry, in fact, lost most of his land holdings to this scheme because he didn't have the cash post-war to pay his taxes, but he did fight to keep Mayberry Springs, and keep it he did. We have an interim period of recovery. That sounds like such a nice word, but the subsistence lifestyle of the post-war era was nothing that any of us today would hope to live through. But something happened west of Bear in about 1874 that west of Mayberry Springs, that helped the local populace, and in particular David Mayberry, silver ore. Silver ore started to be found in what became Silver City. Silver is a crossroads community west of Crystal Springs. You can pass a sign for it off Highway 270, and you're actually not too far from some of the mining that Diamond Joe Reynolds speculated on and digging. And so the boom that happened at Silver City was cause for David Mayberry and his wife to expand the inn. And they turned it into a beautiful thing. This is my first photo I ever took of it when Larry Rhodes took me out to see it. I have some other photos we'll go through after we're done with the talk here. But he built the entire east side and added these beautiful columns in a Greek revival style. He also expanded the inn to several more rooms. He added a very large dining room. It was quite a sight to see. You walked through a door and there was a staircase in this large room, which you can only imagine would have been full of people, of every sort and color from every corner of the earth. And with all of this happening, he also had a bathhouse that he put in the lower bottom part of the inn. We don't know if it was part of inn number 1 or inn number 2, but the bathtubs came out of the Rector bathhouse, which is historians in the city know was the first commercially successful bathhouse in Hot Springs. And he was very proud of that fact. And we know that, in fact, one of those wooden bathtubs lasted into the 1970s before it succumbed to rot and decay. And we have to point out that David Mayberry at this point in time is quite prosperous with the amount of traffic. He's halfway between Hot Springs and Mount Ida. A horse could be expected to travel about 10 miles in a day, maybe a little more. There were some other communities to the east and several more to the west, but he was somewhat the destination. And he was making quite a bit of money also. He was making his money by, of course, leasing out rooms. He was also selling meals. He was also selling whiskey. And he also was selling baths for people to recover in. And unfortunately, Mayberry Springs also had a reputation for violence. And there was, in fact, a card game that went wrong and a man was killed in the lobby of the inn. And even into the 1990s, if you knew where to look, you could see where some of the blood stain was still out in the timbers of the floor. I have heard other stories, too, of other violence happening out there. And I understand from that era, this was not uncommon if you were traveling to inns. You very much depended upon the credibility of the person or people that ran the inn to ensure your own safety. So David Mayberry got very adventurous. About 1875, larger quantities of silver are being found in Silver City. It achieves a population of about 1,000 people. And so David decides, I've got all this land. What do you do in this country? You create a subdivision. So that's what he did. He filed the plat for Mayberry Springs, the town of Mayberry Springs, in the Mount Ida courthouse. And he had plans to subdivide the lots. He named streets. It's an interesting plan to see, and I've got it in one of the photos we'll see, because you have this very straight grid city, but if you know the terrain, you would park your car on a hill like this, or park your car down on a hill like that. You would not have wanted to live in Mayberry Town. You probably would have moved to Mount Ida after living in Mayberry Town. So the silver boom at Silver somewhat lets out by about 1878, 79. And David Mayberry himself, we don't know, we think he could have passed away as soon as 1880. We know he was deceased in 1882. He was buried in a cemetery that was later in the pathway of Lake Ouachita. The graves from the cemetery, as they were known, were removed. Sadly, David Mayberry's grave has been lost to history. We don't know if he's under the lake or if he's somewhere else. But with his passing in 1882, he has traffic. There's a recovery going on post-war in the state and in the counties. And in 1884, something else gets rumored to be discovered, and that is gold in Bear, Arkansas. Now, Mayberry Springs, in its 1884 existence, would have had Albert Pike Road that went in front of it. Well, let me clarify. Albert Pike Road did this, and then it came to the inn, and it did this, and then it did that. And David Mayberry got the road commissioner of Montgomery County to approve not having a straight road in front. Who would want that? We want the road to come right up in front of our inn. How entrepreneurial is that? True fact. So there's that road, but just a bit off to the right, there's another road that went to Bear. And that road is a Forest Service road. You can still see it on aerial maps today. So he was at a very important juncture of the main route. There was the Mount Ida road to Mount Ida, but that was several miles to the north. It's an east-west route. It wasn't exactly well-traveled, although it had its use by people in the northern cities. But where he was at what we call Albert Pike Road, that was a heavily traveled route. And then to have the other route going to Bear and Bear to discover possibly gold was just a wonderful boom for Mrs. Mayberry, who survived David. And so with the Bear mining boom, you see a great deal of prosperity. The family really nailed it to locate their inn where they did and to have the good fortune of the Springs. At this point in time, we find the next owner of Mayberry Springs. Elias Rector was the son of Governor Rector. Like him or question him, he had been the governor. And Elias went to law school and decided he didn't want to practice in Little Rock, so he moved his new family to Hot Springs. His wife was Rosewood Elkhorn Rector. Her father was a U.S. Senator and later Mississippi State Governor. So moving her out to the wilds of Hot Springs, such as it was, actually was a good move because his first case that he argued was at the courthouse in Mount Ida. So he took Rosebud with him, and they stayed at the Mayberry Springs Inn. This is the expanded inn, the one that most of us are used to having seen, and they really liked the place. So he went and argued his first court case ever in Mount Ida, and we don't ever find out whether he was successful, but he was successful in another sense. He came and they spent another night at Mayberry Springs, and he commented, "This is really just a most remarkable place." So he had another court case later on in Mount Ida, and this time Rosebud had a stomach ailment. Something wasn't sitting right with her, and she had this pain, and so she told Elias she wanted to stay at the Springs and he could go do his work in Mount Ida. So he took care of his court case, came back, and she had had a water cure and was relieved of her pain, and she commented to Elias, "It would be really nice if we could own these springs someday." So Elias, starting in 1888, to please his wife, began buying land around Mayberry Springs and surprised her one day in 1892 when he told her, "Honey, we own Mayberry." This Mayberry Springs, I've read so many accounts of, was absolutely idyllic. The area was free of pests that would attack fruit trees or vines. I've read a story of a peach that was 10 inches across that they harvested. There's another story of a cabbage, one cabbage so big it filled up a wheelbarrow. And in this environment, the Rector family had a natural air conditioning system left over from the old inn. Remember, I told you the original inn was this long rectangle. And then to that, relative to where y'all are sitting, they built the east wing. But that rectangle was there with a very long overhang, about 10 feet. And I've seen this phenomenon. Larry Rhodes and I used to go and work to stabilize the inn, and you'd stay at night, and you could see this happen. So off Lake Mountain and Billy Goat Mountain in the evening, you'd have a fog that would descend. It would hit the creek where the springs are, and it would build up, and with it, it brought cooler air. And it would just literally waft right through the building. And you'd feel the drop in temperature. Sally Rectorhain, the son of Elias and Rosebud, often said even in the summer, they spent the nights under blankets because it was so cold inside the building. It's a natural phenomenon. The family later on decided that they tired of that, and I quote Sally in a 1974 quote about the inn. "I pleaded with the family not to close it up, but as usual, they thought me a fool, and they closed it up, and since then, we use fans." The Rectors at the time built a very large stable. They stored their corn and hay in the upper loft. They turned the 4 guest rooms into a nursery. I was thinking how to quickly sum this up. In David Mayberry's inn, one of the ways that he profited was he had one modern-sized bedroom carved up into 4 rooms, each with 1 bed. And Sally used to say that as a child, she, as a child, could extend her hands and touch either wall. And that hallway was on a crisscross formation. So one room, 4 little rooms, and hallway is about this wide. When Larry and I went through to restore the building at one time, there was still a section of the old wall left that David Mayberry had built, and it was 1 plank thick. So one room was on one side of a plank, another room was on the other side of the plank. You know, who needs code, but you can do it yourself, right? So they also converted the back 3 rooms into 2 rooms. Remember, Elias and Rosebud had a family to care for. And they also stocked a pond. They built it and stocked it with fish. There was a story of a warm water spring, or a few of them actually, at the base of that dam. I've never been able to find them. And they talk about spending their summers out there, leaving hot springs, loading up wagons and carriages, the dangerous ride over Thornton Ferry and the rocks that were there, seeing snakes sometimes, seeing cougars, sometimes a bear, coming out to Mayberry Springs, unloading. Because the family kept a caretaker there year round, they didn't need to remove the family silver or the linens back to hot springs. They could leave them there. And the building was white and painted white, which is the style of color that David Mayberry had enjoyed. And just the whole gurgling of the springs, and I can tell you, having been there many times, it does, you somewhat take it for granted after you're out there. It really is quite an idyllic existence. They raised blackberries, they had an orchard, they had a massive garden, and lots of room to play. And Sally wrote several accounts of going to visit neighbors, and which neighbor had a horse, and which neighbor would talk, and which neighbor was scary, and all of these other interesting things to a young girl growing up out there. She wrote once, "I can remember Papa swimming, and I clung to his broad back while he swam with me across the lake and back." It's interesting that Elias stocked the pond with fish, but he never allowed anybody to catch any fish. And he also was very particular about who cut trees. It's said that at his death in 1921, that the entire Rector farm there was 700 acres, and you didn't dare cut a tree without his permission, and he often went with some of his workers and servants out into the forest, and he would decide which tree he would cut. He was extremely particular. I have to be careful. I was neighbors with Don and Ann Dirks when I lived in Hot Springs. I loved them dearly, but there's a story about the original Mr. Dirks coming out to Mayberry and trying to get Elias to sell him some timber, and Elias just wouldn't hear of it and told him what he could do. He could leave, and that's the polite version. So let me tell you about the springs. So there are 4 springs of note. One was called Mama's Spring, which you'll recall Rosebud had some of the water to relieve a pain in her side. It was known to be good for cathartics, and in fact, it was noted that some oil came out of the spring, so it's thought that had a positive effect on it. Then there was Father's Springs. It was used for ulcers. The Indians would also evaporate it and use that. And they say that Elias sent it off, and it came back as pure carbonate ash. Calcium ash. Then there was Harry's Spring, which was a kidney spring. Amelia, which was one of Sally's daughters, had they thought tuberculosis of the kidney or bladder. She was in Hot Springs, so Elias had the water put into barrels once a week and brought to Hot Springs, and she recovered from her illness, and she never had a relapse. And then we also know that there was an ice spring. The spring is still there. It's surrounded in the original rock that David Mayberry surrounded it with. And there is a documented case of a woman who didn't have vision, who went through a regular course of washing her eyes, presumably over several days or weeks, and regained her eyesight. The rectors were very ambitious people with the property. They built a tenant house. I mentioned the orchard. They had peach trees. One of the peach trees is still there. I estimate it to be about 60 to 70 feet tall. It has stopped fruiting, but it's an amazing sight because if you know anything about peach trees, they love to grow straight. So once you can see it, you can pick it out from a distance. They also, I mentioned, cultivated the blackberries. The family, because of its appreciation for that resource, the next generation that lived there was that of James Alcorn Rector. His nickname was Indian. And James Alcorn, who I've written about previously, is the man from Arkansas who became our first competitor in the Olympics. He did earn a silver medal in the 100-meter dash at the 1908 Olympics in England. And it's kind of a sad twist of fate. he had a special starting position that allowed him to get quickly ahead of a pack. And while he's on the ship crossing the Atlantic, he happens to be talking with someone who he doesn't know. I believe the man was from the Netherlands, would be one of his competitors in the race. And so he taught that man his special starting position, and that man won the gold. And Indian was asked later, do you feel like you got cheated? And he made a very astounding comment. He said, no, we're sportsmen. We look out for each other. He didn't see anything wrong with it. So I think that spoke to his integrity. He became a lawyer. He never married, but he kept Mayberry Springs looking very much like a country villa. He took great care of it, electrified while he was there. But then again, with his passing, the house again fell into some question about what would happen to it. It fell into decay. And then who remembers bicentennial fever? Anybody? Okay. So for those of you who aren't old enough to know, in the early 70s, we in this country had a resurgence of interest in our oldest buildings. I do recall distinctly reading a book from the 1970s talking about if the Hot Springs Opera House had only lasted another 6 or 8 years, perhaps it more than likely stored as a part of bicentennial fever. There was a great push to try to appreciate our older buildings, and Sally Rector Hain caught that fever and sunk a hefty fortune into Mayberry Springs. She did essential structure, foundation, and I would even say probably some of the improvements to the grounds. The building, in my opinion, probably would have fallen in the 1980s, but due to her work, she stabilized it for another generation. After her, the building again falls into some disuse. It's in a family trust. It's there. It can be used by family. And a gentleman by the name of Mike Tripp, who was a well-known musician in Hot Springs, has a brilliant idea. He decides that he should use Mayberry Springs to be an entertainment venue. So he pursues National Register of Historic Places nomination. He gets it on the register. And I've read some of his plans. I think he had a very solid idea. I don't know exactly why it didn't work, but I really see him as a man of vision and insight. And he did manage to collect some of the right people in the right place. My involvement with Mayberry Springs starts in 1994. I had moved to Arkansas a few years before to work as a newspaper reporter here for the Sentinel Record. And I met Larry Rhodes at an event where he was dressed up as a reenactor. And we kind of hit it off. And I asked him about, are there any old buildings around? And he said, oh, wait till you see Mayberry Springs. So that photo behind me is from our first visit. It was the first photo I ever took of several photos I've taken. And I became quite enamored with the place and persuaded him we needed to do something to stabilize it. So we went through the entire building and did what two professional guys could do in their spare time. We repainted the entire building, top to bottom. I'm proud to say I did the gray paint on the stairs. It was always easy for me to pick it out as I drove by on the highway. We got a very real appreciation for the building, but also a very real appreciation for its decay. Larry and I had two different approaches. Larry was a throw jello against the tree and see what sticks. I was more community oriented. It didn't cost us our friendship, but our Mayberry projects ebbed and flowed according to who felt his idea was better than the other. It was a friendly rivalry. We never, came to blows or anything like that. But in the process, we enlisted Steve Chitwood, the Forest Service district. Was he ranger, I guess? I guess he was a ranger. He would come over to Mayberry and bush hog it for us. Larry was very good about getting local people involved in trying to stabilize the place. And then I moved away. As one of my friends said, I ran away for a few years. That's true, I guess. And so Larry turned to a nonprofit organization to try to stabilize the building. And while the family was agreeable to stabilizing the building, they were not very in favor of the group using it for hunting. They didn't want anything to do with the liability that could come from flying bullets not landing in proper places. And so they declined. And then Larry, about 2006, decided he had to do something. He was feeling that time was running out for Mayberry Springs. And so he appealed to the haunted aspects of the building. There are occurrences of very strange things that happened there. Some of them are true, a few of them are not. One of those I don't think happened was that David Mayberry to the best of my knowledge, did not burn his wife's body parts in the fireplace. He would have had a hard time cooking the next morning or getting his house cleaned if that had happened, if you think about these things. Now, Louis Goodman, who was a very reputable gentleman in the community, said that in 1915, he had heard both in that year and at previous times, different things like fiddle music playing, and then also some clapping going on. And sometimes he would be on the property and he would hear from the front of the inn a woman yelling, "Help, help!" And sometimes he also heard a woman screaming. I'm not going to reenact the woman screaming. There was a element of society that came out. Larry said I wanted to get historians interested, and I got hysterical people interested. Some of the videos are still on YouTube. I like watching them because if you don't pay attention to the commentary and you avoid reading the comments, you do get some very interesting photos and angles and an appreciation for exactly how magnificent was this place, built literally in the early founding years of this country. So in a last-ditch effort to restore, I approached Michael Taylor, a builder in Arkadelphia. I said, let's just get it all out there. Let's see what it would cost. He came in and he did a very amazing architectural structural survey of the building. I learned a great deal about it, having this outside pair of eyes, knowledgeable in construction techniques. But his estimate for stabilizing the building in $2007 was $300,000. It wasn't likely to happen. Kingwood Forestry put the property up for sale in 2009, and in June of 2009, I got a text message from Larry Rhodes that said that Mayberry Springs has burned to the ground. In the aftermath, Larry and I mapped out the perimeter. We took a number of measurements and then watched nature reclaim it. There have been a few owners. One owner wanted to rebuild the inn, but a little problem in the family happened and that didn't come true. There is now a private property owner. I'm not going to share who he is, but I do have permission to go on the property. He does want to be left to himself, and I respect that. But he has restored the fireplace with the chimney, but he does insist that nature go back and reclaim the property as it used to be. I also hate to say that it's been removed from the National Register of Historic Places. I learned that last year. I think that's unfortunate. The redoubts are still on the property. We still have the springs that were cased by David Mayberry, which possibly might even be one of the older man-made structures. I don't want to say oldest, but one of the older man-made structures in the county. We also know where old roads were, but it is what it is. Let's go to the photo, shall we? You want to just take charge and I'll tell you when to go to the next one?
Yeah.
Okay, so that's the end. This is the sale document from Kingwood Forestry. I'm going to point out a few things here. So this is Sunshine Road here. This is 270. This is the inn. Lake Ouachita is north of here. Hot Springs is that way. And the original 5 acres of the inn, where most of the activity happened, took place here. I'm trying to think. Whoa, oh, very good. And then David Mayberry would have built his first cabin over here, and then built the inn after that. Let's go to the next slide, please. This is the town of Mayberry Springs. Look at it. Doesn't it look glorious? Doesn't it look like a place you would like to live? Wouldn't you like to move there? So, Albert Pike, the inn is somewhere in here. The terrain here, I mean, from here to here is about a 50-foot elevation difference, and there are a lot of springs in the way. I really don't quite understand what he had in mind, but it was worth the attempt. Next slide, please. This is the inn from a print in the Garland County Historical Society, the book, The Record, which, by the way, if you take out a membership, you can get a copy sent to you. That's the inn. Looking at it, Albert Pike Road would be behind the photographer. You're looking roughly to the southwest. The main porch area here was called the Gallery by the Rector family. And then we've got some other photos, but you can see the Greek Revival columns to the left. Next slide.
Or the gray stairs that you painted at the base of those columns that are right there?
Yes.
Yeah,
Yes.
I know exactly what you're talking about.
Yes. And again, another view here looking to the southwest. You can see the fireplace, which would have been original to David Mayberry's original inn, the gallery, and then these steps here went off to a plateau area. If we were at the inn in the 1850s, we would have seen horses over here. This is where horses were kept and fed. Keep in mind, the soil is just saturated with a lot of it's rich soil, it's fed by water, and it's a very large plateau. I've got another photo here with Larry roads in it, and you can see why it would be ideal for keeping horses there. Next, please. This is Henry Rector, our Civil War governor, governor for 2 years, as the war between the states broke out. And he is famous in Hot Springs history for the kitchen capital. He had an idea that he'd move state government to Hot Springs. The Arkansas Gazette had a rather humorous article at one point in time that said, if anybody knows where our government is, please report it to Little Rock. It's generally known they got lost in the mountains for about 2 months. They came out at Hot Springs. It was deemed that they probably did more drinking than anything else, but we have found some records of some actual state business that were done. The records were kept in the kitchen of the bathhouse, and that's how Hot Springs got the nickname as the kitchen capital. And after about 2 weeks, they decided they'd have enough, and they went back to Little Rock. Next slide. Another photo of Governor Rector. Next slide. This is Elias Rector. So this is Henry's son, went to law school, came out, moved to Hot Springs, practiced civil law, and eventually with his wife Rosebud bought Mayberry Springs. Next slide. Sally Rector Hayne is in the lower left. It's thanks to her that we have a great number of stories that were written down. She wrote them down for the Garland County Record, which you get if you're a member of the Historical Society. You can get a copy in the mail. And it's worth reading the back issue, particularly the issue from 1976, where she gives her first written account and several very endearing family stories. Next slide. This is Larry Rhodes. Larry didn't like to be photographed. This was for a story that we did about the first Jesse James robbery by stagecoach. This location is close to Gulfa Creek and 270 Western Malvern Road. I thought it was one of the more humorous ones because I thought I was interviewing a man about history, and here he dressed up like one of the bank robbers. Next slide. Thanks to the Garland County Historical Society, we have a photo album from the Rector family with several photos. Instead of bringing the album here, we thought we'd share the photos with you today, some of them. And so this is from the album. So it reads Mayberry Springs Side View. I'm going to guess that this is probably 1920s, early 1930s. The inn very much looked like this. We are on the piece of property over by which the caretaker's cabin would have been occupied. And another note too, up in here, there was a bridge. So when you came down the staircase and went across the bridge, you literally, it was just a single path. There was a great deal of attention given to visitors and their convenience at walking across the property. Next slide. Again, you've got another view here. They call it the front view. It's a similar angle. The rock spring that was mentioned that was built by David Mayberry, which still stands, is roughly, it's over in here. Next slide. Mayberry Springs, as it used to be, with creeks kept clear. So Elias Rector used a great deal of clay to surface the creeks and also the bottoms of the springs. He put concrete casings around them. They still flow to this day. They're still clear. He put a lot of attention to detail. It's very remarkable because if you think of it, the entrepreneur, David Mayberry, did not make those efforts, but Elias Rector, wanting it to be a safe family spot, did make those efforts. Next slide. So it reads, my youngest at the Springs. This is James Elkhorn Rector, also known as Indian, with his car at Rector Springs. Next slide. Sally Rector Hayne at Mayberry. It's interesting, there are so many photos we could show you in this album, and I encourage you to go to the Historical Society and look for it yourself. It's an idyllic scene. You can have all sorts of poses, and it was a very safe place to have a family. Next slide. Rector Wooden at the bridge, which was built out of a Model T frame. It's still out there in the woods, but you can't cross it anymore. Next slide. So here's a view from the gallery. To the right are the gray steps. Albert Pike Road would be out this way. the creek itself came around this way, around the building. Where the ladies are seated, David Mayberry and his inn actually had a room there. And when the Rector family bought the property, they got rid of the room because Elias said, I want to be able to see my springs from the porch. And if you went and stood at the edge of that porch there, now there are a few steps, of course, that went down it, but you could go over and have a very clear view of your springs. Next slide. Again, another family outing. And this is Bill Lawson, Middleton, can't read all the names, but family members. Next slide. The famous porch. The banisters here, to the best of my knowledge, were crafted by the Rector family. We do have a note of some earlier banisters by David Mayberry for his inn, but the Rectors, we believe, installed this design. It lasted well into the 2000s, and a family I know who has a connection to Mayberry was able to salvage them before they burned. They're in safe storage now in Archibald. Next slide. What I like about this one is the size of the Spanish bayonet. Now, if you've ever tried to plant Spanish bayonet, you know that it is very particular about its soil type. You can't just put it anywhere, which I found out the hard way. So this bayonet, look at the size of that. I mean, those are several feet tall. They were growing out there every time I've walked, and some of them still survive. It's such a lovely ground to look at it through these old photos. You wish it could almost have been in color, but it is what it is. Next slide, please. So here we have a full view of a few things I'm going to point out away from the microphone. Into this door is the bathhouse. So they had a separate bath, one for a man, one for a woman. This height here is about up to here on me. I'm 6'1", so it came up to about here. This area here would have been for storage. And then the banister, again, with all the ornate carvings in it, went this way, and then this hallway went through the house. Next slide. This is a painting of Mayberry Springs. There's several photos and pictures of it across the years. Next slide, please. So then, now I get into the boring stuff. You can tell the preservationist is leading the talk because I have a photo here I'm making you look at of electrical connections. I wanted to get ideas, though. Everything about the building I could. Next slide. This is the caretaker's cottage. I took this photo in about 1994. This is not the caretaker cottage that would have been there for the Rector family. This was raised for a later use. Next slide. Next slide. This is the inside of that building. I would say that entire building would probably fit from that pilaster there to here. It was a very small, compact, single bedroom, single bathroom, small galley kitchen house, but it had this little archway in the living room. Next slide. So this is the barn. The barn doesn't get a whole lot of appreciation. As far as I know, I'm the only person who's photographed it, which I just can't imagine. I'm sure there's photos elsewhere. But this was an incredibly large barn for a building and grounds of this size. But considering too, they had to feed the entire family for a summer, and the people that lived there as caretakers year round. Next slide. That's the front door of the cabin where the caretakers lived. Somebody must have felt the need to take the middle out. I can't imagine why they didn't just take the whole door. Next slide. This is David Mayberry's spring. This is the spring that he built. It's still there to this day. Stonework has it all intact. Next slide. And next one. Now this is, again, you have to keep in mind, this is the 1990s. We don't have all the sophisticated cameras we did then that we have now. So this is Larry Rhodes to the right, and he's pointing to the pond, which is in the distance. And we were there in the fall, so you can see a bit of the rise behind the pond there. Next slide. This is also the pond itself. It has filled in some, but it's still a wet spot. Next slide. So here we have the stairs that would have been off to the west side of the building. There was a stone walkway here, and then over to this side would have been the plateau that had the space where horses grazed. Next slide. This was the banister as we found it, early 1990s. Next one. Next one. This is another view of the barn off to the back side. We did go in the building. That probably was not the best thing. I didn't tell my mother I did these things. It was not a very safe structure then. It was full of a lot of things that you would expect to find on a small holding, a lot of mattresses and water heaters and paint cans, I can recall. Next slide. And then I like this view here because you see the traditional Greek Revival columns that David Mayberry built. The dining room is what was off to the left. This is often called room number 3 just because Sally in her map that's in the Garland County record, she referred to this as room 3. The bathhouse would have been here. These would have been the dining rooms. This was the kitchen on the back. And then there was a back way out. And back roughly about here was a stone larder that Elias Rector had built. David had had one. Elias built a better one. It was a place to store milk and creams and things that needed some cold refrigeration for the time. Next one. So this is the photo I shot on April 1st, 1994. And let me demonstrate a few things here. Albert Peck Road, the road now is out here. The original road, you can see the jonquils that lined it went right through here. Again, he got the Montgomery County Road Commissioner to move the road officially to go literally right in front of the building. Some of the jonquils, because of the time of year, are coming up. I did have a jonquil collector tell me those are among some of the oldest varieties known anywhere in the state. This was the bathhouse, room number 3. So when you went up the staircase, you could go over here into the lobby, or you took a left, and then you went down this hallway. And down this hallway, just to the right here, was a staircase this wide. The steps were about 1 foot tall, and that went up to the attic. No code here, okay? As you went down this hallway, there was a room that was actually Mrs. Mayberry's office, and just past that a door. And when you opened the door, you were about this high up, and there was a staircase down and a very large dining area. The kitchen had a fire in the 40s, but they rebuilt it. Next one. I've always liked this one because you have to give the most important person the cameo, and that's the jonquils. Next one. This now is the interim landing. So here's the front of the building here. Down this way is the dining hall, just a little bit down. The stairs down was in 2 sections. There was one section here and then one section down here. If you turned around to go into these doors, you went in underneath the building. That's where the family stored its storm windows, its food supplies, its canned goods, some of its paint. If you continued down this way and went around, you accessed the bathhouse. That there was built in about, we think, 1853. Next slide. The banister. Next one. These then are the columns as we found them. It's pretty impressive engineering. When I talked with the builder about it in 2007, he was quite amazed that it had held up as long as it did. The building used what was called balloon construction. And in balloon construction, the walls are as integral a part of the building as the floors. It's like unibody construction. So if you took off this wall, then the whole building is simply going to collapse. It's just built that way. That's how they constructed things in the 1870s. Next slide. Next slide. And a little bit of storage. What's interesting about this is, this would have been Sally Haynes' work here. She's the one that got people to go in and stabilize it underneath. She's the one that also added the 2x12s and the 2x10s. But look what she left. David Mayberry's original logs. Next slide. That's the pantry. It was rumored that snakes like to hang out in there, so we did not go inside. Next one. And this little interesting picture here, not only because of the plumbing, but look at the planks on the floor. Those are original planks. We're in the 1850s section of the inn. I'm going to guess those planks are 12 or 14 inches wide. It would have been cut on site too. Next, please. This is the fireplace. So just imagine that word isn't there. Okay. So this was Sally's pride and joy, and it had decayed, and she has since repaired it. It has decayed again, and the present owner has since repaired it. It's still in working order. I have heard a story of a gentleman who took one of the stones from the fireplace home with him, and weird things started to happen. Window shades started going up. Doors would close. Multiple doors would close. Floors would creak with nobody on them. And his wife figured it out before he did, months before he did. It's that stone, she said. And this is what he told me. You need to take that stone back. So, oh, no, no. Well, the shades kept going. Gusts came in, doors opened and closed. She got really nervous. She finally persuaded him, take that stone back. So he put it back into the fireplace from which he got it. And guess what? All the weird things stopped. Next slide. This was a point for Larry and I to show the electrification of it. Next slide. This is the back side. So in David Mayberry's time, there were 3 rooms here, and this roof here stuck out another 10 feet. And that's how I was able to capture these cool breezes that came in and literally air conditioned the entire house every night, all summer long. And then this here was the pantry. Well, the kitchen was here, this was the pantry, and then there were some other log pantries underneath here. This is very much unchanged from David Mayberry's time. The Rector family saw no need to change something just because it was old. If it worked, they continued to use it. Next slide. I'm glad I took the next few photos I'm going to show you because it shows the material arts of the inn itself. And we do get a glimpse into some of the wallpapering of the times with a little surprise I'm going to share with you here in a few minutes. And we get an idea as to, yes, there was this natural wood underneath all of this wallpaper, but the Rector family felt very important to wallpaper the rooms. Next slide. So this is a print. This would have been a print that possibly the Mayberrys would have put up in the 1870s. Next slide. So Larry and I started taking these prints and holding them open, and we were amazed to see the detail here. And keep in mind, this is pioneer rural Arkansas, post-war subsistence economy, completely dependent on your own safety, a structure of government existing, but a great deal of uncertainty, and you're wallpapering the rooms. Next one. I like this one. This talks about cotton and cotton sales in Mount Ida. It was from a Mount Ida newspaper. So in the era, in the 1870s, so in the era that this was placed, we first took a wood wall, we put newspaper, which was cotton content, not wood pulp like we've used for the last several decades, cotton content. We put that against the wall, and then we nailed this cheesecloth onto the newspaper in the wall, and then onto that we spread the wallpaper. And the wallpaper is made out of a fiber. It's not a paper wallpaper. It's a very fibrous material. So we pull it off, and I still remember reading this saying, Larry, this is about cotton sales in Mount Ida in the 1870s. But that's good use of resources going on. Next slide. So here's Larry standing next to the only closet in the entire inn. In the American economy of the times, you got taxed also based on how many closets you had. Closets were counted as rooms for taxation purposes. And, anyway, next one. This is some of the balloon construction in the attic. Next slide. We're in the attic here. That is really remarkable. If you built a house like this today, I don't think they would let you live in it. It's extremely primitive, and yet that's what held up the roof at Mayberry Springs for the better part of a century. Next slide. This again, looking to the other side. Oh, go back one. So this is balloon construction. Everything here is dependent on this. Everything up here is dependent on that. These floors are dependent on the outside. There's another problem with balloon construction. Balloon construction does not have fire breaks. That's partly why Mayberry Springs went up so quickly. Each gap there is like a chimney. It's like you built a wall of chimneys. As soon as something burns in one location, there's so much air going between the floors, it's just a matter of time. I did hear one firefighter say, although they got onto the scene, once it was fully engulfed, that he was there and it was completely down within, I think he said half an hour. And it doesn't surprise me. The building wasn't built to withstand fire. Next slide. A few other improvements here. Next slide. Back into the barn. Next slide. And I think this is my last one. So this is Larry standing on the plateau where the horses would have grazed while people stayed at the inn. And it's a seldom photographed side, but I think it shows a lot of things. It shows the inventiveness of the people to try to create an opportunity and use the natural surroundings without altering those surroundings. There was no big earth moving here. Nobody built this plateau. They built the building into it And they used their native resources. The stones there for that fireplace and chimney came from the location, and much of the original wood was cut on the site too. So with my closing comments, I was going to read you a quote, but I don't want to keep you here all day. So I would share a summary of something, and I sent Larry an email in June of 2009, and my whole reflection was that Mayberry Springs literally left in a blaze of glory, a literal blaze. And perhaps that's a good thing, because it has now entered that point in time or that place in history where, in my mind, it's always perfect. All the walls are white, all the windows are there, all the windows work, the dining area is full of people, all the stories that happened are still there, they're always the same. And the thing that feeds all of this are my memories. And in that regard, Mayberry Springs is always protected, because in our memories, it's always there. It's always whole. And interestingly enough, even today without the buildings, the springs still run. Thank you.
Thank you very much. This is one of the more interesting, detailed preservation stories that I think we've heard here. So we're honored to have you. Thanks everybody for coming. Tell your friends to join the Historical Society, as this gentleman has mentioned, and be safe out there.